He didn't need a weapon in public, just a smile, a shopper's card, and a plastic bag with yogurt inside. In a Food Lion parking lot in Travelers Rest, South Carolina, an 80-year-old woman who never missed work met a man who looked helpful. Hours later, she could barely stand. Cameras watched him guide her like a gentleman, and then they watched him wipe a car clean and vanish across the state line. That single trip exposed a method as ordinary as a grocery run and as lethal as a syringe. This is how a convicted kidnapper turned sweet, familiar things into traps, and how a community's missing person call unraveled a hidden pattern of predation. Viewer discretion is advised. This film discusses crimes against older adults, including abduction and homicide. Details are kept factual and respectful. Welcome back to the channel. Here, we break down complex investigations with clarity and compassion, honoring victims and spotlighting the investigators who refuse to let them be forgotten. If you value rigorous, respectful storytelling, consider subscribing. Your support helps these stories reach the people who need to hear them. Today, we follow the disappearance of Edna Suttles in August 2021, and the man at the center of it, Daniel Glen Printz, a former inmate who served decades for kidnapping, and who, investigators say, never stopped preying on vulnerable women after he walked out of prison. What begins with a missing person report becomes a case study in patience, manipulation, and the weaponization of everyday trust. The first sign that something was wrong was painfully simple. Edna didn't show up. At 80, Edna Suttles was still clocking in, reliable, steady, and stubbornly independent. She'd been a bondsman, a caregiver, a straight talker with roots in her community. She kept routines like other people keep faith. So when she failed to appear, friends and colleagues felt that silent alarm only families of punctual people understand. They called. They checked. Her dog was home. Nothing was broken. Nothing was ransacked. Just absence, loud, wrong, immediate. Deputies issued a be on the lookout for her Jeep Grand Cherokee. A search expanded from her house to habitual stops. The grocery store, the bank, the places where life leaves its smallest footprints. In the age of cameras, the past isn't just memory. It's footage. And the footage would soon show something every detective prays for and dreads at the same time. A clear, careful suspect who thought he looked ordinary. Across from a Best Western, a Food Lion parking lot watched the morning unfold. The tape story was chill in its simplicity. A man buying a 4-pack of yogurt, a polite wave, a brief chat, a passenger side door opening. He carried himself with that practiced stillness of someone who'd learned that real danger is quiet. The name that would attach to that face, Daniel Glen Printz, would come later. For now, there was only motion and timing. 2 cars, 1 woman, 1 man, and a bag of yogurt that didn't look like a weapon until the lab cracked it open. When Edna's Jeep returned, the cameras captured a scene that sits heavy in the chest. Edna, no longer steady, no longer the force her friends knew, being guided, almost cradled, into the suspect's sedan. Helpful hands, careful posture, a man who looks like he's assisting someone who's unwell. Then the cleaning, wipes across door handles and interior. Calm, practiced, unhurried, as if he'd done this before, as if he planned to do it again. We've all seen people help someone to a car. It barely registers. But what was in that yogurt cup? In a moment, we'll talk chemistry and how 3 ordinary medications turned a receipt into a roadmap for murder. Cases like this rarely break with a single aha. They tighten with friction, bits of data rubbing against each other until the heat makes truth. The Food Lion purchase wasn't just a video. It produced a loyalty card number, a timestamp, and a register record. That number tied back to a man across the state line in North Carolina, Daniel Glen Printz. Investigators followed the data to his property near Bostic. There, the odd began to stack up. Started small, like all big things do. A purse that didn't fit his life. Keys that didn't match his vehicles. Personal effects that whispered of other people's stories. And then, out on the property, something stranger. A bee box, a wooden hive. Beekeeping isn't unusual in rural Carolina, but what was inside the box was. Detectives lifted the lid and found Edna's belongings. Keys, bank card, jewelry, a pocketbook, and an opened yogurt cup. It's one thing to suspect sedation. It's another to read it in black and white. Laboratory testing found residues of lorazepam, an anti-anxiety benzodiazepine, tramadol, an opioid analgesic, and cyclobenzaprine, a muscle relaxant. None of these are rare. That's why they're perfect. In combination, they can fog judgment, slacken muscles, slow reaction times, leaving a person pliable enough to be moved without force. On camera, it can look like caregiving. In a courtroom, it reads like control. The yogurt was no accident. It was delivery. Printz, the man who walked with a wipe and a bag, wasn't improvising. He was drafting an alibi on film. She was unwell. I helped her. But chemistry has no sympathy for narratives. It only speaks in molecules, and the molecules said the quiet part out loud. Who is Daniel Glen Printz, and why did a kidnapping conviction from the 1990s matter here? The answer shows how quiet men hide in plain sight for years. To understand what happened in 2021, you have to rewind. In the late 1990s, Printz was convicted of kidnapping in Michigan. He would serve years, decades, behind bars. On paper, incarceration is supposed to change behavior. In practice, it can refine it. He emerged into the 2010s with the kind of patience people mistake for calm. He kept a low profile. He blended. He learned where trust lives in American life. In errands, favors, and the warmth of, let me help you with that. For predators who target older adults, the doorway isn't force, it's need. A ride to the store, a signature on a form, a handyman who can fix the thing a daughter usually fixes, but the daughter moved 2 states away. He positioned himself as the person who steps in when families are thin and patience is thinner. The role sounds kind: helper, friend, boyfriend, caretaker. But the script underneath is older than prisons. Control access, create dependence, and bend paperwork to your will. Investigators searching his property didn't just find Edna's effects. They found identification documents and personal items belonging to other women. Scraps of other lives folded into drawers like old receipts. They found hints of financial control. Talk of powers of attorney. Money moving after the person couldn't have tapped send. The scent of a pattern thickened. He called it help. In interrogation, he said he wanted to purge his sins. In a minute, we'll parse a strange, veiled confession where hypotheticals sound a lot like bodies. Interrogations rarely resemble television. They meander, they prod, they circle until a suspect slips. Not by shouting, but by saying too much while pretending to say nothing. When investigators pressed Printz about Edna, he hedged. Then he did something unexpected. He started talking about hypotheticals, about things outside your radar, about helping someone end suffering. That is one body. He hinted at another person who might talk. That's the second. He mentioned a death followed by the disposal of a body so money could keep arriving. And then a fourth. Someone who tried to rob him. That did not work out well. He refused details on Edna, but said he could lead officers to her within 3 feet. Defense attorneys hear that and see ambiguity. Detectives hear it and see a roadmap. Crooked, dim, but leading somewhere. Predators who dress cruelty as kindness often confess sideways. They call killing a favor. They call control protection. They call theft taking care of things. In that room, Printz wasn't admitting murder, he was rewriting it. But sooner or later, the map must be walked. He said he could lead them to Edna within 3 feet. Did he? What they dug up next ends the search and opens a door to 3 more names we need to say. Months after Edna vanished, authorities recovered her remains on land near Printz's North Carolina home. The ground doesn't care who you say you are. It gives up what it's asked to keep when enough hands ask at once. With the recovery came coherence. The Food Lion timeline: yogurt purchased, man enters passenger seat, midday return with a suddenly incapacitated Edna, vehicle transfer, hotel wipe down, state line drive, clicked together like teeth on a gear. The B box wasn't a curiosity. It was a stash. The yogurt wasn't a snack. It was a delivery system. The suspect wasn't helpful. He was meticulous. Investigators and prosecutors now had more than suspicion. They had a body, a timeline, toxicology, surveillance, and the beginnings of pattern evidence that stretched beyond a single case. Was Edna the only victim? Prosecutors say no. Next, 3 names, and the paper trail that suggests a predator who practiced help like an occupation. Cases like this ask the most painful question. How many? As prosecutors built their case around Edna, they told a wider story in filings and at sentencing. Printz didn't limit his predation to 1 woman or 1 year. They named 3 other victims tied to him by evidence and circumstance. Women in their 60s, 70s, 80s. Women who needed help with ordinary life. Women who, in the end, were erased with extraordinary calm. Dolores Sellers, 88. Nancy Rigo, 66. Dolores's daughter. Lee Goodman, 61. For the public, the details of each woman's last days are a patchwork of medical records, financial motions, and the suspect's proximity. For detectives, they're the echo of the same song. Access, sedation or force, and paper after the person is gone. Texts, emails, signatures, money drawn with hands that should no longer exist. This is the brutal genius of administrative camouflage. If a predator can convince the world that a person is still doing things, sending messages, paying bills, renewing something, then absence looks like privacy, not danger. Loved ones second-guess themselves. Police hesitate. Time, always on a killer's side, gets an extra hour, then an extra week. How did he keep getting access? The answer is everything ugly and ordinary at once. Isolation, trust, and the optics of being the only one who helps. Every serial predator, in hindsight, looks obvious. In the moment, they look like a neighbor. Access was the first strand. Printz didn't burst into lives. He volunteered into them. A lift to the store, a handyman's fix, a ride to a doctor's appointment. He slid into roles that encourage gratitude. Helper, boyfriend-type companion, caretaker. Older adults, especially those outliving their cohort or living away from adult children, need people. Predators specialize in becoming people. Sedation was the second. The drug trio tied to Edna, lorazepam, tramadol, cyclobenzaprine, isn't cinematic. That's why it works. They don't spike a toxicology screen with neon. They fog the senses. In public, heavy sedation reads as illness, not assault. On camera, a man guiding a woozy woman looks compassionate. In reality, it's a transfer of custody. Erasure was the third. He wiped cars. He moved vehicles to mislead. He stored personal items, IDs, keys, cards, in remote or hidden places. He allegedly posed as victims by text or email to keep financial flows alive. He sought paper authority, powers of attorney, access, signatures that look legitimate to anyone who isn't looking too closely. If you want to know how someone can do this more than once, you don't have to imagine brilliance. You have to imagine patience and process, and a society that's too hurried or too polite to pry when something feels off. So what finally stopped him? 3 things. Cameras that captured optics, chemistry that cut through excuses, and collaboration that refused to let jurisdictional lines be hiding places. Cameras anchor time. The Food Lion footage didn't just show faces. It pinned minutes to movements. Yogurt purchased, passenger seat entered, sedated return, vehicle swap, wiped down at the Best Western. It stripped the narrative of maybe and turned it into when. Jurors don't live in the parking lot. The cameras do. Chemistry is the cold witness that never stumbles. The lab report on the yogurt cup translated suspicion into molecules. You can argue about meaning, you can't argue with residue. When a prosecutor holds up a chart that lists lorazepam, tramadol, cyclobenzaprine, the story changes from "she seemed unwell" to "she was chemically disarmed." Collaboration turned threads into rope. Local deputies, state investigators, federal agents, and prosecutors coordinated across South and North Carolina. Kidnapping charges, especially kidnapping resulting in death, carry federal teeth. In the federal system, life means life. There is no parole. For a suspect who traded in time, that matters. We're at sentencing, and at the question that sits after every verdict. What does justice look like when it can't turn back the clock? In federal court, Daniel Glen Printz pleaded guilty to kidnapping resulting in death. The sentence: life imprisonment. It doesn't bring back a mother, a grandmother, a neighbor. It can't restore routines or refill a seat at Sunday dinner. But it accomplishes something predators fear more than any camera. It stops the clock. At sentencing, prosecutors didn't pretend this was a one-case story. They said the pattern out loud. A man who preyed on older women, who cloaked violence in caretaking, who turned paperwork into camouflage. They named the other women and sketched the shadow each left. Families spoke about people who were far more than victims. A woman who survived the Great Depression and still laughed like a girl. A mother who could make a grocery budget sing. A friend who brought casseroles no one could replicate. That is the cruelty of crimes like this. They target people whose love language is ordinary life. Justice in these cases lives in layers. A conviction. A sentence without parole. The public naming of a pattern so communities can spot it sooner. And the insistence that victims be remembered for their lives, not their last days. Why does this story linger? Because the props aren't theatrical. They're ordinary. A store loyalty card, a hotel parking lot, a bee-box, a cup of yogurt. Predators understand something we don't like to admit. Optics. If you look helpful, people will let you be close. If you look like a caretaker, cameras will record you as kind. If you speak with the soft cadence of concern, strangers will hold a door and never wonder what's in your bag. The answer is not paranoia. It's alertness. When someone new gathers too much control too quickly, over rides, over medications, over money, over appointments, that is not kindness. That is a lever. We honor Edna and the other women linked to this pattern by saying their names and learning from their stories. Elders deserve dignity, not dependence engineered by dangerous people. If you see a pattern like this forming around someone you love, say something. Ask harder questions. Verify. Visit unannounced. Call the bank. Call the doctor. Refuse to be soothed by, "I'm just helping." If this documentary brought clarity or sharpened your instincts, share it. Awareness is oxygen for prevention. Subscribe for more in-depth, respectful true crime storytelling that keeps victims at the center and equips communities to spot danger earlier. Thank you for watching and for caring enough to look twice at the ordinary.